Thanks a lot. Really interesting stuff in there. We're a EF company doing a lot of enterprise B2B sales, so naturally I want to dig into that a bit more. Big fan of your work, and Mark Cranny as well from a16z. One question I had is the transition from open source sales models to, let's say, high margin PO commanding end result. We see companies like Red Hat coming into the market, but usually they tend to focus on service to get those margins. How do you navigate that transition without losing too much value in the process?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so let me start by sort of disagreeing respectfully with sort of the premise of the question, which is the premise of the question was, how do I transition from low margin open source or near free open source to sort of a high margin SaaS model? And the best companies will figure out how to do both concurrently, which is there is an open source component, maybe it's free, but you use that as marketing cost. Right? So in the old days, what that money would have gone to is trade shows and marketing people to influence Gartner so that you're up and to the right in the magic quadrant. New companies basically invest all that money in open source and developer evangelism, which is to say, I have a dedicated either direct report to the CEO or very close to the CEO. All they do is try to get more developers to use it. So that means a lot of sample code. That means snappy videos that make the developers go, I want that, right? So think Twilio, think Stripe. It is no accident that developers got to use those APIs. There was a very deliberate and funded strategy to go after those developers, right? So one, you have to take that super seriously. And then two, you've got to figure out when they pay me, how do they pay me, right? And that should be a 90% gross margin business with all of the right features. And of course, it's sort of a challenge to keep ahead of the community, right? You have an open source community that wants to basically open source everything because that's sort of their incentives. And you've got to figure out, how do I stay in front of that with the right set of features? The easy thing to do on the right set of features for this is what I call the enterprise ilities: scalability, reliability, right? So failover, that doesn't need to be an open source project. That can be in your enterprise project. Or role-based access control, right? It's all the super boring enterprise stuff, right? But enterprises like nothing more than say, you can do that, but you can't do that. That doesn't need to be in your open source project, right? So being smart about the ilities makes it a 90% gross margin product, and so you give away a little, but when you charge, you look like a normal software company.